Morning all, and welcome to our Riddle Thursday. So today I've got two riddles for you. I think one's a little easier than the other, and some of you have been doing very nicely with the riddles. So let's see, this is a bit trickier than I've kind of given you. So the first one is, what can you catch but you cannot throw? So what are you able to catch but it's not something you can throw? The second one, which is very tricky, but I'll be very impressed if any of you get it. What begins with T, finishes with T, and has T in it? So, what begins with T, finishes with T, and has T in it? So those are our two riddles for today. Let's see if any of you guys can guess either one of those. Right, and today I'm going to be reading you a story about keeping secrets, because that's certainly a very important part of friendship and having people trust you. But it also shows us how sometimes when we kind of spread a secret or we spread something that we think we know, that things can change, right? And we've seen it around the coronavirus, where some piece of info starts out and then it gets passed on to different people, and by the end things are so confusing that we don't know what's real and what's not, and we get what's called misinformation. So I think this is an important message to kind of look at, hey? So, Don't Tell Anyone But is a story about learning to listen by Susie Linn. And the publishers are Top That, and it's illustrated by Erika Meza. So let's find out about this. Squirrel was excited. She hopped and skipped and twitched her bushy tail with excitement. She had a secret. She had to share it with someone. The very first someone she saw was Rabbit. Rabbit was busy looking for the greenest, tastiest patches of grass. So she took a quick look at Squirrel and carried on with the search. Squirrel lowered her voice and whispered. What is Squirrel's news, I wonder? Don't tell anyone, but I'm having a big party with yummy food and funny hats. Oh, really? Mumbled Rabbit, who was far more interested in her delicious grass. She wasn't listening properly to Squirrel at all. So when Rabbit spotted her friend Mole, who was busy digging, she had some rather strange news. In hushed tones, Rabbit whispered in Mole's velvety ears. So, we have Squirrel telling Rabbit about her party that's going to have yummy food and cool hats. Let's see what Bunny heard. Don't tell anyone, but Squirrel's having a party and she's inviting lots of stray cats. I see, murmured Mole as he inspected his newly dug hole. He wasn't paying much attention to Rabbit. Later, Mole spied his friend Fox basking in the autumn sun and decided to tell him the news. He scampered over and said, so there's Squirrel. There's Rabbit sharing the news with Mole. Let's see what Mole tells Fox. Don't tell anyone, but Squirrel's having a picnic and she's making pies for all the rats. Zzz, whatever, snored Fox lazily. He was far more interested in catching the last rays of sun, and had only half heard Mole's news. As day turned to dusk, Fox saw his friend Owl perching in an oak tree, waiting for the moon to appear. I might as well tell him the news, thought Fox, who was more awake by now. So he walked over to Owl and quietly called up to him. There we go. So what did Fox hear, I wonder? Don't tell anyone, but Squirrel's having a picnic and she's going to wear her fancy pants. Well, that's a thing, hooted Owl, paying more attention to the moon than to what Fox was saying. Late as dawn was breaking, Owl spotted his dear friend. He was busy picking his way gracefully through the undergrowth, looking for tasty autumn berries. Come here, dear, called Owl softly as the deer half turned to him, and he lowered his voice and said, you see how the story is changing, eh? Don't tell anyone, but Squirrel has a pink stick to tap with when she learns to dance. Deer stopped for a second and looked up in surprise. Then he turned back to a particularly juicy crop of blackberries. He hadn't quite caught everything that Owl had said. That afternoon, Deer bumped into his friend Mouse, who was scurrying around the leaves. He was very busy eating the berries that Deer had dropped. Owl told me the strangest thing, Deer murmured. Don't tell anyone, but Squirrel's wearing lipstick, and she's gone to tea with all her aunts. Mouse was very hungry indeed, and he certainly wasn't in the mood for paying much attention to woodland chit-chat. But when Mouse heard his friend Woodpecker rat-a-tat-tatting on an old oak tree, he thought he had better pass on the news. If you can spare a minute, he shouted, to make himself heard above Woodpecker's noise. Woodpecker looked down, and the mouse continued at the top of his little voice. Don't tell anyone, but Squirrel's buying a boat ticket to sail to the sunny side of France. But Woodpecker hadn't entirely stopped rat-a-tatting, so the message he thought he heard was quite different. What, really? Squirrel's won a prize? A lucky chance? Exclaimed Woodpecker loudly. Squirrel had been busy minding her own business, but when she heard Woodpecker's news, she jumped up. Ah, so can we see how it's changed so many times? Stop! Listen! You've got it wrong, she called out in frustration. At that, all the creatures stopped what they were doing and looked up. It's not true, cried Squirrel. What, you haven't? Had a lucky chance, asked Woodpecker. No, I'm afraid not, replied Squirrel. But you are sailing to sunny France, aren't you? Inquired Mouse. No, not ever, Squirrel declared. What about wearing lipstick and having tea with your aunts? Tried Deer. Absolutely not, cried Squirrel. So no dancing with a pink stick then? Hesitated Owl. Goodness, no, sighed Squirrel impatiently. Did you even have any fancy pants? Asked Fox nervously. Humph, no, Squirrel spluttered. And baking pies for rats isn't your thing, murmured Mole. Not in a million years, wailed Squirrel. And you're not having a party with stray cats? Rabbit whispered. No, 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 Squirrel groaned. But what is happening is that I'm having a big party with yummy food and fancy hats, and you're all invited. The very next day, everyone gathered in the woodland clearing for Squirrel's big party, and they all wore fancy hats and had the best of time. Isn't that a sweet story? And a good lesson on why you should learn and learn to listen, and also how when you hear information, you need to be very, very careful that the information coming to you is 100% right, eh? Because lots and lots can get lost as you hear it from different people. Okay, have a great day and good luck with those riddles.